to my teaching learning session. I'm SINGH and taking care of bio courses for psychology. Now let's continue with social psychology, attitude change being a subtopic. Speaking of attitude change, as attitudes are formed and they are acquired, they are skills that can be formed, we can equally make changes in the attitude. That means, for example, if you started learning an activity that you like, we can make changes in the attitude towards that activity by using some of the theories which are of attitude change. We continue with the first theory of attitude change, which was given by Fritz Heider. Fritz Heider in 1946 stated that attitude change tends to happen when there is a sense of imbalance in interpersonal relationships. So what are imbalances? Imbalances could be a sense of discomfort, a sense of discomfort, a sense of not feeling right about the interpersonal relationship. And this was informed and explained in the form of three triad, like in the form of triad with three people and a three pointers involved, like a triangle. So this stated that when Heider explained that balance must exist between interpersonal relationship of a specific thing, something, two or more individuals which are together should always have a positive relationship between all the three. So if we have an A and B and C, the relationship of A and B, B and C and A should be positive, hypothetically. Also, imbalance are associated with a lot of discomfort, a lot of anxiety, a lot of an urge that leads you, an urge that pushes you to seek balance. So imbalance usually is there so that you make changes and seek balance. And as said, that Fritz Heider's concept of balance theory was explained in a triad, which was given a demarcation of POX. So, like ABC, as I stated as an example, it was given in the form of POX. So, let's understand in this POX model, where does P and O and X stands for? What does P, O, and X stands for? P stands for a person. Person, this is the first person. O is in comparison another person, and X is the attitude, object, event, situation that we probably need to change, probably need to make a movement of, or probably someone which is getting the imbalance in between. Now, what is imbalance in this triad and what is balance? Let's take an example of the picture that we have. When we talk about a balance situation, remember balance would be all the three sides are positive, which is the relationship between P with O with X, and X with P is positive. So all the three sides of the triangle, which is the triad, has to be positive. Now, speaking of the next, which is another positive and a balance situation, would be that there are two negatives and one positive, which is the P has a good relationship with X has a good relationship with, P has a good relationship with O, and O and X do not have a good relationship. So it's like PX negative, X and O negative, and P and O positive, which means one of them is having a negative and the other two are positive. And this is a balance situation. Now let's give you an example of what is not balanced and how do we make changes in that imbalance situation. As I gave an example even before, I'll continue with the same thing. Let's take an example. P is a person who is getting their daughter married to someone who is getting married to a person O, son of O. So P likes O because that's obviously that's the reason that you will get the two married, which is you like the person and that's the reason that you're getting the two married. Now P does not like X. X is dowry. Dowry is the event or probably the attitude that we are holding about an object, event, and situation. Probably we need to change. So X is dowry. But let's take the example of the green triangle that you see on your left. The green triangle indicates two negatives and one positive. So P does like it. P does not, when we talk about it, P does have this thing of not, liking X. So this is one negative, but P likes O, which is the other person. But at the same time, O likes X, which means that there are two positives and there is one negative that we have. As stated in the context and the content written, you will find that imbalance includes one negative and two positive situation, which is P obviously likes the person O. That's why they're getting their child married with them. And O obviously likes X, which is they want dowry. But the P does not. The person who's getting their daughter married does not like dowry. So it's a negative. So two positive and one negative leads to an imbalance situation. Either it be this or it be that everything that we talk about is something which is a negative situation. But neither P likes O likes P, and X like P. So every relationship either has to be negative, or two has to be positive and one has to be negative. I'll give you another example. Like, a child loves chocolate. So X becomes the chocolate, P becomes the child, O becomes the mother. Now P loves chocolate, which is obviously children love chocolate. They literally, want to have that commodity after every meal, and this is something every child goes through. A kind of fight between the child and the mother regarding eating sweets and its moderation. Now P likes X, which is the child likes chocolate, which is the X is chocolate. But obviously the P will like O, which is the mother, but the mother does not like the chocolate. So there again comes down to be what? We come down to something which is two positive and one negative. Either get all of them positive, which will seek balance, which is the imbalance will seek balance. Now what we need to do? We need the mother to understand that the child likes chocolate, so you also need to like chocolate, but give them some reward, give them some punishment, give them some moderation or some uh, rules of learning, so that the child does not have chocolate all the time. So what do we change? We change the idea of the mother that the chocolate is not incorrect if it's had in, when you eat it in moderation. So now the child likes the chocolate, which is the P likes the chocolate. Obviously, the child likes the mother, which is the P likes the O, and now the O also likes X, which is chocolate, which is all positive. So a balanced situation is all positive that you have. So this finishes the example of POX theory. The major agenda of this theory was whenever there is imbalance in any of the relationship involving three, which is a triad that you have, which is a person, another person, which will always be two people. It's an interpersonal relationship, and one object. We tend to use the concept of POX, which is the balance theory, changing the imbalance into balance. So this was one way of attitude change. Let's move to another theory, which is called the cognitive dissonance theory. So let's understand the concept of dissonance and who came up with this. Leon Festinger in 1957 stated, debated about, a lot of psychologists had this debate that is it necessary that all the components of attitude, which is the affective component, the behavioral component, and the cognitive component, needs to be in sync. So, for example, if you are a part of, a drive which is saving the paper and is reducing the plastic in your environment, you need to be driven, you need to feel for that event, you need to show up behavior for it, and you need to have what? You need to have a thinking, reasoning, problem solving regarding regarding that concept that suggests you need to know why plastics are bad, why do we need to remove them. So you need to know the how, whys, and what of the plastic. So suggesting that a lot of debate happened that is it really necessary that we need to have all the components of attitude in one direction? So is it like really necessary that you need to have feelings, emotions, and behavior associated to something which is attitude? So yes, Leon Festinger came to a concept of dissonance. He stated that dissonance can be defined as an aversive state of arousal that occurs when a person holds two or more cognition which are inconsistent. So when we are talking about any consistency, and when we are talking that everything should be sync about attitude, so if you're thinking about an attitude about, let's take tobacco consumption. So if you feel that tobacco consumption gives you a sense of relief, remember you need to know that you might die out of tobacco. So that's a very opposite thing. Knowing that you might die out of tobacco is something which is negative. Let's not take die out of tobacco, but a regular use of it, and at the same time and you like tobacco. So this is like knowing the adverse effect and doing what is not correct about it. So one positive and one negative, two cognition not moving in the same direction, causes dissonance. So a thinking reasoning pattern, if two patterns, two kinds of cognition or more kind of cognition are inconsistent with each other about an attitude, that leads to dissonance. So let's take an example. A person who knows tobacco is dangerous for health. It might causes respiratory concern, it might cause other issues, and hence they do not consume it. So it's in sync. It's harmful and you do not take it. So that is consistent. Inconsistent is knowing that you can have issues with it. You might have throat cancer, respiratory issues, and then you're having it also. So there are two or more cognitions which are moving in an inconsistent pattern to one another, which is called dissonance. Now, this American psychologist defined that the cognitive dissonance is an unpleasant psychological state that results from this inconsistency between two or more cognitions. So, whenever there is an inconsistency, which means whenever two cognitions are moving in an opposite direction, that causes a feeling of unpleasantness in people. And this inconsistency, which people believe how they behave, motivates them to engage in actions that will minimize their feelings and discomfort. So people attempt to take care of this aversion by attempting to do a behavior which is ideally inconsistent to the entire cognition, which I just completely stated. A person who knows that tobacco is harmful, a person who knows that tobacco can cause throat cancer, a person who says that tobacco can actually give you addiction, this further can give you a behavior that you attempt personally on the basis of reducing this aversion, reducing this discomfort, and to manage the rejection which is coming from the cognition. So, what do? You do an overpowering effect to manage that discomfort. So, what do people do? People ignore that box picture that comes on the cigarette, the picture that comes on the cigarette, and keep smoking. They ignore the picture and keep smoking. So the behavior is indulging into tobacco intake. So now, what influences cognitive dissonance? So what can impact the dissonance? First is your belief. Your belief about the attitude can actually influence your cognitive dissonance. So cognitions are more personal, we all know. Why? Because they are, they're stemming from your belief system, your thinking, reasoning, problem solving, your process of knowing, and probably some people's experiences. So it's a belief that you hold about the self. It's highly valued. So the number of dissonant beliefs, the more dissonant thoughts you will have, and greater the strength is going to be dissonant, which means if the cognition that you hold has multi-discognitant belief systems, the more cognitive dissonance that attitude will have, and the more aversion and unpleasantness that you will experience. So let's take an example that let's say children keep lying about smaller things, and they lie about not getting great marks. They lie about the entire class did not score well. They lie about the highest score. They lie about not being prepared, and that's the reason that they do not do well. So the more the dissonance is in terms of the examination, let's take a maths examination. The child probably does not like maths. So the first thing is the child is not scoring well. Second, the child lies that no one did not. No one in the class did well. Everyone was not able to perform well. The attitude is maths exam. And what are we doing? Knowing that the maths exam went well for the other students, knowing that the you are lying to your parents about the fact that no one scored well, the highest marks is what, and whatever you've got is stricter marking. So did you see the amount of lying which is happening, which is leading to dissonance from the pattern of what actually happened. What actually happened was there's an average good amount of number which has been scored by students. There are a lot of kids who have got full. They love maths, and it is not the same thing. So more the dissonant pattern, more stronger is your cognitive dissonance. So this finishes with cognitive. This is one of the factors that influences cognitive dissonance. We can see this. See, smoking again is given as an example here. So cognitive dissonance is an unpleasant feeling, which is when your belief systems are inconsistent with each other. So belief is smoking is unhealthy, but I smoke. As I said, you know that it couldn't cause you cancer, it can cause you breathing, respiratory issues, but then you smoke. Now, the change that you can get is the change action. Smoking cigarette is unhealthy. I do not smoke cigarettes anymore. So this can happen. This can happen on the basis of the change belief. The research in smoking not conclusive. I continue to smoke. So if, for example, the belief is still discognitive, which is you feel, no, I haven't got people. My friends have been smoking for so many years. They have not had any issues. They are rather living a healthy life, and they do not have any sort of ailment also. So your research is done actually makes you conclude that there is no harm in smoking and you still smoke by the end. So this is what is called as cognitive dissonance. Let's see what other factors which influences cognitive dissonance. See, cognitive dissonance is also influenced, when people feel very uneasy and uncomfortable. That's the time. What's the kind of cognitive dissonance that we have? We have anxiety. There could be stress in the form of what is the unpleasantness we are talking about. The unpleasant feeling that you feel could be anxiety. It could be discomfort, simple discomfort, physical and mental. It could be stress, sadness, a sense of regret and guilt which is coming in. and at the same time some amount of shame. After doing that fact, you have some amount of shame. Why did I do it? How did I do it? So that's what causes the unpleasant feeling of cognitive dissonance. Now, if you want to change the belief, changing the conflicting cognition is one of the most effective ways of dealing with cognitive dissonance. So if you want to have an attitude change, make sure you target the dissonant, the unpleasant feeling. The most difficult one should be targeted first, and most deeply held value when it's taken off is leading to cognizance. So, for example, if the person feels that no, in the past 5 to 6 years I've been seeing people having tobacco consumption, but there's no one who's had a concern with it. But remember, when we were going through COVID and when we were going through pandemic times, people who were having already a recurrent bouts of smoking things, or probably people who were addicted. Let's take an example, or people who were addicted or on the higher chain of having tobacco consumption were suffering from COVID more than the others. Why? Because the respiration was already blocked. There were issues in the lungs already. So this was impacting their immunity and further impacting their resistance towards COVID. So that could have been movement of the a solid hard values could have been taken care of, and thus we could have struck the cognitive dissonance and led to cognizance. Because researchers suggest that at that point of time, people who already have lung issues, smoking concerns, were having grave problems of COVID. Also, you should remember religious concerns, political learning, also a belief system which is coming from a family learning, a value cannot be changed. If it is already dissonant from the age of 4, 5, and 6, and it's a part of a family living that you learn every day, then it cannot be removed. So those cognitive, discognitive belief systems would be the most toughest to change. And this finishes with the two theories that we did: the balance theory, which talks about balance, imbalance to be changed into balance, and cognitive dissonance, which says that you need to change the dissonance into cognizance. Now, this is the same thing. What is cognitive dissonance? Probably domestic abuse is bad, but no one should put up with it. But the behavior is, I continue staying in abusive relationship, which today's teenager do. They've been tormented so much in their relationships. They sacrifice so much, which is very unhealthy to a point. If you sacrifice too much in a relationship, and they end up being in the relationship and end up liking the same person, that is a cognitive dissonance. How do you reduce it? My partner does not mean to hurt me, so it is not really an abuse. So you're reducing your dissonance by this and the behavior, that I'm not in an abusive relationship, so there is no reason to leave. So either you do this, or you understand that it is domestic violence and I need to move out of it, and you move out of it. So that is an attitude and a changed behavior. This is just one example where you assume it to be domestic violence and it could not be. But if it is, then you probably keep moving out of it. That will be dissonance changes to cognizance. After attitude change, let's come to the same subtopic, that what is causing this discognizance to continue. See, a lot of times, that unpleasant feeling, that feeling of guilt, that feeling of anxiety, unpleasantness keeps continuing. Why? Because it's a forced compliance. Like, this is the best example that you could get. A lot of people are still smoking in their environment. The reason for that is because it's a peer pressure. You end up doing it. You hold up that belief so strong because probably it's an external pressure from work, it is an external pressure from your friends. If you do not do that in a social category or a situation, people might leave you, people might not like you. So that one causes forced compliance. You forcefully are taking up that request time and again because you're under pressure. You do not want to be sidelined by your group, so you continue doing that. And most of the teenager continue doing a negative behavior despite it is a dissonant cognition because of this, which is forced compliance. Another thing is effort justification. Another cause that we keep continuing the the dissonant feeling or the dissonant attitude. This is effort justification, and psychologists have their own theory where they view groups and clubs as worthwhile, just according to the effort justification theory. They say that people believe a goal is worthwhile if you work way too hard for it. So if you've heard a lot, like if you worked hard a lot for a goal, you feel that it justifies your action. It has to come to success. So it is, so even if they never reach their goal, they will justify that their actions were worthwhile. So let's take an example. When we are working for a task which isn't very important, but it is a caliber, it is a task that we know really well how to do it, and you put in all your efforts for it, but it's not one of the most important thing that you probably reflect in your work profile, but you're doing it because you know it really well. So after you even do not get an appreciation for it, what do you say? It was one of the most important things in my skill set, so I completed it. So what did you do? You justified the effort which was very hard only put by you. So this is effort justification that you're doing. The fact that you're justifying your actions of being worthwhile, even if you do not reach the goal, even if you're not appreciated by people, you still say that you've done well. So that is called effort justification. This is an example that they say in the club example. People will believe a group is worth belonging to if they make an effort to get it. Also, in more the effort, the more that they gain acceptance, the higher they rate the club to be. This is effort justification according to the cognitive dissonance concept, which says that the people's behavior and belief don't align. They experience discomfort, and to relieve that discomfort, they state that their behavior was equivalent to the effort which was put. So, very simple example again for teenagers. Whenever teenagers are under pressure of being accepted in a group and they are given a task which is ideally not responsible, not very important, but they've been told by a friend to do it. They do it way too much. They drag that task so much that they want to put in that I'm doing this task because it's important, because my group is really important. It's one of the best groups that we have. First of all, you're justifying of being in that group, which is not that special group as such, but you justify that your efforts are so much, and that's the reason the group is worth it. So that's effort justification that you end up doing. It's very similar to the club examples that we want to gain acceptance. Might not be the destination is not that fruitful and not that worthy of it. Also, few more causes that will probably lead to more dissonances, which is decision. People make decisions which is more bigger decisions, smaller decisions on a daily basis, and we are faced with two situations, two similar situations. Could be two bad situations which are similar and two good situations. We are often left with a feeling of dissonance because both the options are equally appealing. Often it happens that once the choice is made, people need to reduce this feeling of discomfort, and we accomplish this discomfort by justifying that why out of the two that one decision was one of the best decisions. Like whenever this is a very good example. Whenever we have a fight with a friend and you end up losing a friend, you always say that it's always for the good because you end up losing it. So the decision that you made of moving away from them and restricting yourself, restricting from a friend, you stated that it's been a good decision because that's an option that you left with. So you justify by stating that it's one of the best options that you had. So that is called decisions that influences cognitive dissonance. So two major theory that helps you change your attitude. One was balance, the other was cognitive dissonance. Now let's come to a new topic that we have, which is called persuasion. Persuasion is a process in which one person or entity or through media or mass communication, one is tried to be influenced about something. It could be another group or a person to change your belief, to change your grouping, to change an idea or an attitude about something. So it is persuasion is what? When a person tries to influence you about something, or when it's coming through mass media or mass communication. So what is this is what is persuasion, and persuasion had a dual model process, which is a dual process model, sorry, of persuasion, which is a model which comprises of two processes working together. One was called the elaboration likelihood model, and the other was called heuristic systematic model. Heuristics are shortcuts. So you get to know the latter one requires lesser effort and lesser demanding, whereas the elaboration likelihood model, there are two models in one. So that's why it's called the dual process model of persuasion. So the elaborative model suggests that here the information processing happens in a way that the information processing is very deliberate. It requires more attention. It requires more effort. Where the other one, which is the second. So let's take an example. There are two parallel systems working together. The effort elaboration requires more effort, more demanding, requires more understanding. Whereas the heuristic systematic, its function is in a systematic pattern, but requires less effort, it's less demanding and very less analytical. So they two work together. So let's see a diagrammatic pattern of understanding the two. So one is the central route, the other is the peripheral route. The peripheral route is going to be more analytical, requires high effort, which is the effort elaboration that we talk about, which is the elaboration likelihood, where you tend to elaborate most of your concepts. So when we talk about elaborating most of your concept, anything which is explained with more efforts. You require more time for it. You need to be more motivated and more analytical. And the change that happens in the attitude because of this dual process model persuasion, the central route would be more long lasting. Now, in the peripheral model, peripheral is the outer area, the outer case. Central is the core. So if you make changes on the peripheral, it's going to be less motivated, less analytical, less demanding, because it's only happening on the outside of the message. You only change the outside, not the core. That is the temporary change. You can take an example for this. So let's take an example. A child is told that this activity is good and you just do it because you get great grades for it. You get good grades for it. The child is doing it just for the sake of good grades. It's only on the periphery. So when it's only on the periphery, remember the core is not being changed. The child is not skilling in that activity, but only completing that activity to get good grades. So it's the peripheral route. Core route is going to be probably the child learns the activity. Let's take the activities playing instruments, playing guitar, or probably some other instruments that they have, and the child loves it, enjoy playing with it, learns all the technicalities of playing guitar, the tones and the rhythms and everything. Remember, this learning is going to be more long lasting. Why? Because we use the most central, analytical, more demanding, effort taking route, which is the central route. I hope this is clear. This was the dual processing thing. I will also explain the two models again. The two models that we have is the first model was the elaboration likelihood model, which was given by Richard Petier and John Capicipo in 1980s. They said that the goal of this model is how persuasion takes place in changing the attitude, particularly focuses on the communication. It influenced the person's attitude or feelings about a certain object or topic, and also the person is thoroughly convinced that this is the most appropriate thing which is to be done. So elaboration is elaborating each and every concept, elaborating and analyzing everything, the communication, the attitude change. That's why it is stronger and more long lasting. When we talk about the heuristic approach, it offers a very economic advantage because it tends to happen in less time, minimal effort is taken, and you end up doing it in lesser time. You're more available, there is more accessibility. So availability refers to the knowledge structure heuristic based being stored in memory for future use. So accessibility of the heuristic applies to the ability to retrieve from the memory for use. So they just focus on the fact that you do not store it, you only use it for retrieval. And when you retrieve it, let's go to the example again. The child retrieves the playing of guitar, plays it a little to show it and get great grades, good grades, knowing that I know it, I'm able to retrieve. But for example, if a child needs to explain how to play guitar to his juniors, will he or she be able to use the heuristic approach? No, because analysis would not clear. The focus was not communication. If the attitude has to be changed, the person's attitude, how he feels things and behavior has to be changed, which only happens through elaboration, like human model. That completes the two model which functions together. Some people utilize when they are making change in the attitude of people, either through elaboration when they have a lot of time and a lot of effort of people, or they change it only in the heuristic model, which is only in the periphery, only in the outer case of the attitude object. Now let's move, as this is again the same thing. Another picture, which is central root and the peripheral root. You get to see central root occupies high motivation, high analysis, a deeper communication, deeper processing. The quality of the message stays intact, and the changes are long lasting. Whereas in the peripheral root, and it's on the side case. Remember when we talk about the side case, it's low motivation. It is the ability to change only on the outer, and it's very superficial. There is no focus on the message, there is no focus on the intent, and there is no motivation. That's why the change is not long lasting that we have. So this finishes with the dual processing model that we have, which encompasses two models within it. Now, when we talk about what is persuasion, and persuasion happens through the dual process model, let's understand, are there factors which are impacting persuasion? So will it impact how are you persuading someone. So how are you persuading someone in terms of, if you want to influence somebody, what are the factors that can be influencing and determine that are you being able to persuade them successfully, or this went wrong and that's why persuasion did not take place. So the first is the source variable, a person who's delivering the information. So remember, if a person who's delivering the information, which is when we talk about, let's take an example, you went to buy a television, and two most important source characteristics that you would look up to is credibility and attractiveness. Remember, if the credibility of the source who's explaining you about the television or the LED that you want to take up is not very good, is not very what do you call this, is not very apt, does not have the actual knowledge about what you're buying, remember what will happen. The credibility is the expertise. The expertise is following row of the salesperson. You do not get convinced that the television is of the kind of money that you want to spend on the value of it. So that is one thing that you need to take care of, the expertise. The second is attractiveness and trustworthy source. Attractiveness is the source who's delivering it needs to be attractive, needs to be someone that you look up to. You want to see them every time. You feel really nice when you see the salesperson because he knows it all, and you feel he's very, he's someone who knows everything and is very well presentable, and presenting the commodity also. So that is attractiveness. This last, feature of the source that we come down to is trustworthiness. What is trustworthiness? It is, the motive and the honest opinion of that person that makes you feel very comforted. So let's take an example. You go to buy a television and you feel the person is always busy, ignoring coming to you, ignoring coming and going back. The amount of trust is not being able to build within you. Similarly, let's go to the fact of counseling people. When you're counseling people, first you need to have the expertise, you need to be trusted by them, and there needs to be a sense of attraction in you. When we talk about sense of attraction, because that's how they feel that the persuasion, the influence that you are delivering is worth it. So see how counseling and counselors and psychologists needs to be all of this, because you are the source who's delivering the treatment, the technique, and the change in the person's attitude. We are changing people's attitude. So if person is suffering from OCD, suffering from anxiety and depression, you are making changes in their cognition. So changing that dissonant attitude to cognizant attitude. So this was source variable. Let's come to more. The other is message that we come down to. These are all of them that we have: the source, the message, the content, the medium, and the audience that you're delivering to. So these are like the four major factors that could influence persuasion. Like, if you're able to persuade them well or not. Let's come to message that we have. Message variable says that the message refers to what, aspect of the persuasive appeal itself. So probably the message should be the length, the complexity, the language, and so forth. So let's take an example. One of the most central quality of a message is that it needs to be understandable, it needs to be clear. So if I'm telling you right now that persuasion is influenced by source and a message, and if you understood that message is the delivery of the topic that you're doing, that needs to be clear, that needs to be simple, that needs to be shorter, not too much. So that's going to impact the persuasion that you have. So one of the central characteristic of message that they suggested said that the quality it contains. Remember that the persuasion topic needs to be of high quality, not ulterior quality which is not worth it. People would not want to learn it also. So it has to be of good quality. The last that we come down to, I think it's the second last, which is recipient variable. It's the audience. The recipient variable talks about the audience that you're actually trying to make changes in. Remember, the audience who receive the message needs to be high motivation. They need to be keen to come to make that change. Remember, people who are on lower intelligence are more easily persuaded than people who are highly intelligent. So I'll give you an example for this. For example, if you were sitting and you're buying something, a commodity that you're buying on on an Amazon, on any of the shopping portal that you have, I will not name any. So you just saw all the descriptive explanation of what the commodity is like. You saw the reviews and you bought it. Now, you did not check that what is the usability of that commodity. You did not compare the price of that commodity. So lesser analytical intelligent you are, the more easily that you get persuaded. So people who wait to shop for a while are more intelligent than people who do impulsive shopping. Why? Impulsive shoppers are not analytical at all. They are less intelligent, obviously, because they do not compare things, they do not see things very efficiently in comparison to people who are intelligent. Also, high in motivation and a keenness to get persuaded is also important. So, if a person is a very low mood, is not at all interested, remember you can never change them. So, person needs to come with an agenda, has to be an open book, and then it could be persuaded. I'll give you a simple example of an audience. If a person comes to you as a client and you are the counselor, and the client comes with the thought that counseling really does not help me, it's of no use. Remember, persuasion will never happen. Why? Audience needs to be willing, needs to be motivated, needs to be keen, should be willing to make that change. If that's not all there, the change will not happen. So that finishes with recipient variables that we have. Now let's come to another topic that we have, which is called resistance to persuasion. I'll quickly do the run through also, because this is like too much of topic and we've done a lot today. I'll just go through the persuasion again so that you have no problems. So what is persuasion? Persuasion is influence that that you make changes in people's attitude. So influence can be from people. It could be from a mass media also. That's why I gave you an example of a shopping portal. Factors which are influencing. Let's come to the picture, because the pictures always make it very easy and simpler to us. Source of the message, which is the person, the person who's delivering the message. Remember, if the message is delivered by a person who's not an expert, is himself not interested, does not have that warmth and that caliber to make changes, you will never be able to persuade. That's why, whenever there are, let's take an example of life skillers that we see on media. We see religious leaders, we see TED talkers that we have. Why they feel so right? Why do they feel so correct about circumstantial situations which are so painstaking situations, but you feel at ease by listening to them? Why? Because of the expertise that they comprise of, because of this knowledge that they comprise of, and the trust that you have that they have knowledge, and the fact that the expert, the source that you have, is also credible, and also they seem very attractive to you. They speak well, they present themselves so well. So that is what makes persuasion happen. Remember, attitude change is formation of an attitude, and making changes only in the attitude we are talking about. We are not talking about making changes in the person. When we talk about a persuasion, the difference between, that's why I'm making sure I'm going back and forth again. Attitude change happens about an event, situation, and a commodity. Persuasion is an influence on you by a person or by social media on a larger scale. So this is more large scale when we talk about persuasion. Attitude change and attitude formation is very personal to you, because it could be about a skill, it could be about a topic, it could be about a specific a commodity also, an object also. So this finishes with source. So remember, source was one. We have message. Message needs to be clear. The biggest central variable of the message is it has to be important. If it's of no importance, people will not pay attention to it. So that's why we say, when we go for the for listening to religious leaders, if you don't align to their political thought, there's no point going to it, because the message does not vibrate, does not resonate with you. Sorry, it does not resonate with you. So the central quality of the message should be, the central thought of the message should be the quality. The quality should be good. It should be worthy for you. Also, it should be simple. It should be in understandable language, and the length should be lesser. You should not deviate from the topic. Then we have recipient, which is the audience. The audience needs to be motivated. The audience needs to be keen. Also, lesser audience get persuaded more easily. It's such an irony. People who are lesser intelligent will get persuaded easily. Also, younger adults and 25 are more, the early adults and teenagers are more persuadable than older adults. So people who are 35s and 40, you cannot make changes in them, but you can make changes in an 18-year-old and probably a 22-year-old more easily in comparison to a 40 or a 35-year-old. So this finishes with something which was persuasion, factors which can influence and probably make you help persuade people better. Now, resistance to persuasion. Resistance to persuasion. So how do you control it? Reactance is one of the first way to control it. Reactance occurs when a prospect sense that something is trying to compel them to doing something. They automatically start resisting the attempt, and they move away from the conversation. They start ignoring the conversation. Reactance is resistance to the influence which is coming onto you. So as soon as a person starts feeling that okay, it is trying to make an influence on me, they are trying to change this idea about me, and I probably don't want to. This attitude is very dear to me and I don't want to change it. And that's where the reactance starts coming into play. You start avoiding the conversation, you stop listening to that conversation of the person, and you reduce the influence by that. So this is reactance that we have, which is a sense of when you get to know that people are actually compelling you to do something, you automatically move away from it, you start avoiding it. And at times, reactance also gets very automatic when you know that any idea which is contrary to your attitude, you don't want to change it, so you move away from it. So let's take an example. Let's take the same example of smoking. When a person knows, okay, this is I'm going to a drill where people are going to talk about no smoking, and this is not something that I wanted to listen to. So what do? It's contrary to their idea of attitude change. They don't want to change thought about moving away from smoking. What do? They don't listen to it. They move away and they do not listen to it. And probably a lot of times they will not be a part of that conversation. They will not be a part of that. Listening audience also. So that is reactance. Simply moving away from the thought that people are compelling over me. I don't want to be doing it. So then the next is forewarning. Research indicates, to till date indicates, that forewarning leads to a greater resistance following an influence attempt, which means, the method suggests that increasing attitude strength involves forewarning, giving people a chance to develop a resistance to the persuasion by reminding them that they might someday receive a persuasive message, and allowing them to practice how they will respond to influence the attempts. I'll give you a simple understanding of it. Forewarning suggests it is stronger than resistance. Forewarning is as soon as they get to know that there is a sense of change which will come towards their attitude, they start moving. They start moving away from that attitude change environment, or attitude change thought, or attitude change place. So let's take an example. As I said, as soon as people get to know that the place that I'm living it getting it is getting into a no smoking drive, they will stop going for walks. Forewarning, they stop themselves. That's a greater resistance. You end up marking a margin of not being a part of it already. So it's stronger than realizing. In comparison to reactance is you start opposing the fact that people are compelling and forcing you to do something. Here you sense it and you move away. So it's like a forewarning. It's a warning coming in advance, knowing that my strength of my attitude is increasing. I don't want to be a part of this environment. I've just started, when I always know when teenagers start smoking and they start enjoying it, which is such an incorrect thought. They start moving away from friends who actually tell them not to smoke all the time. So that is forewarning. Then there is selective exposure that can actually reduce your persuasion. Selective exposure is as simple, only focusing on selective items, which is this happens when you build an attitude that is strong and do not focus on any change which is around the attitude. So if there's anything around your attitude which is different from your attitude, you don't pay attention to it. So you only pick up your attitude, you will not pick up the change. You do not focus on the change. You rather avoid the other things. So that is selective attention also that we have. Then we have something which is called as counter arguments. Counter arguments are a very simple thing where you have a cross conversation between people. So when we talk about this suggests that counter arguments suggest studies indicate that we actively argue the persuasive message inconsistent to our attitude. So anything which is inconsistent to your message, your thought of your attitude, you just end up arguing. You just start putting forth of the advantages of it. So let's take an example. You want to. This is very common with children and even with teenagers and nowadays. You want to stay in your friends. You want to stay a night at your friend's place. You will try and sit and argue about every good thing about that thing of yours. So you will not let your parents' persuasion of this is incorrect to do, and you end up arguing. No, it's good. It will bond with my friend. Other friends are also coming. I'll be left out. I'll be bullied later that I've not been a part of this night out. So what do? You counter argument. So how do you make sure that you resist the persuasion, reactance, forewarning, selective exposure, and counter arguments? That is what we talk about in persuasion. Let's move to the new topic, which is Unit 5 of the same, which is changing behavior. This talks about relationship between attitude and behavior. So we all need to know that there is a relationship between attitude and behavior. There has to be. An attitude is a set of opinion and a belief systems which, when is very strongly held, will make changes in your behavior. Why? Attitude has three components: affective, behavioral, and cognition. So if you feel too much for the attitude and your thinking, reasoning is also very positive, that is bound to be reflected in the behavior, but not always, right? So there is some sort of a relationship between the two. So let's I determine what let's understand what determines the relationship between attitude and behavior. So attitude specificity will predict the behavior more. So the more specific your attitude is, the more it will predict behavior. And general the attitude, it is not associated with making any changes in your behavior. I'll give you an example. If a person generally says that I do have a knack of psychology, uh, so stating that you have a knack of psychology is a very general attitude, right? A very general thought. Uh, Psychology could be a general psychology. Psychology could be social psychology. Psychology could be developmental psychology. So if you state a specific attitude that I'm very good with social psychology, that is a specific attitude which actually suggests when you're good at social psychology, you are going to be performing well in it. So your attitude will predict your behavior. So specific attitude leads to behavior. Then self-awareness. The more aware that you are about your attitude, the more it will influence your thoughts and mind, and more that your behaviors are going to be like that. So essentially, when people who are privately self-aware behave in line of their attitude, people who are publicly self-aware behave in light of their attitude, perceive that the majority of the other people hold it in, especially when their audience is physically present. So it in both ways tends to happen. So people who are publicly aware, this is an important attitude for me. Let's take an example. Disciplining self is one of the most important things. Once you've decided something, I feel you need to be very self-controlled on making sure that you continue that attitude. And if that attitude is continued and you are able to stick to it, the more that you're going to behave like it. So it's awareness of why it's important, how it is important, for what it is important, is a complete awareness. So privately being aware will lead to something which is a behavior. Also, sometimes people behave in line with the public attitude. Public attitude is like a social group attitude that they hold, and that also leads to change in behavior, because publicly you're working as a collective audience. So when the audience makes changes, you make changes. So when their attitude moves towards making changes in behavior, you also make changes in your behavior. So both privately self-awareness and public self-awareness can lead to something which is behavior. So what indicates an attitude leading to behavior? Self-awareness and attitude specificity. Let's move to attitude assessment. An attitude is accessible to a degree that it springs to the mind quickly, and more accessible it is, more likely that it's going to be consistent with your behavior. So let's take an example. Whenever you're asked what kind of friends do you want in life, and you say, I want people like me, as honest and genuine. So if these are two terms that comes to your mind all the time, remember your behavior and your seeking of a friend is always going to be honest and genuinity. So, and non-accessible attitudes are going to be when you're told, okay, tell me what kind of friends do you want, and you're thinking, and you think for a longer duration, you state, okay, the friend needs to be, and you pick up example from other people's behavior, and you then end up saying that they need to be something which is very honest and attention giving. Remember, this is not something which is accessible. You've looked for it, you've dwelled a lot on it, and then got an answer. So when it's readily available, readily accessible, would lead to something which is a behavior. So it indicates attitudes accessible will have a strong conviction because it's easily available. It's the first thing that comes to mind, and the first thing coming to mind will lead to high accessibility. The better predictors of behaviors is going to be. So more accessible, better predictor of behavior. Low accessibility, lesser prediction of behavior, because it lesser, the strength of the attitude is going to be less. Now let's move to more such the last topic that we have, that we'll connect the two that we have also. When we spoke about something which was behavior and attitude, why did we do that? We did it to understand that will attitude always lead to behavior? So do you feel that attitude will always lead to a behavior? Do you always feel that an attitude that you're holding will always give rise to that particular behavior? No. There are specificity that happens. I'll give you an example for this. There was an experiment which is given in your book. You will go down when you read the topic. There was an experiment which was done by Americans on American hoteliers. This experiment was conducted by Lapierre, and he stated, he asked a lot of you know there was a set of questionnaires which was developed, and the questionnaire stated, and it was a very you will find it a little odd, because here Americans were asked, will you accommodate Asian couples if they come to your stay? So at times of around 1950s and 40s, when this was like a little sort of discrimination between people, American filled up a questionnaire that they stated that they will not give accommodation. They will not give accommodation to couples who are Asians in nature. So the Asian couples will not get any sort of accommodation in our hotels. So this was the questionnaire that they filled, and the questionnaire was general Asian people. Okay, it was not specific. It was just that if you have any Asian couple coming to you, will you? So it did not ask about what do you feel about them, how do you feel about them, is there any dislikability. It was just 2 3 questions about, are you going to accommodate them or not? Maximum Americans stated no. Okay, and then suddenly at the peak time of the vacations, when the peak time of the vacation started, and a lot of people start coming into the hotels, there were a lot of Asian uh, couples that came in, Asian people that came in, Asian friends that came in, who stayed in the hotel. So did you realize that attitude was not specific? Did we ask any specific questions to these hoteliers? No. So specificity is not there. So do you feel that every attitude will lead to behavior? No. So remember, even comes to you. Not all of your attitude can be converted into behavior. Not all of your attitude is a reflection. Your all of your behavior is a reflection of your attitude. So it's not mandatory that every behavior has the kind of attitude that you wish to display. That's not a mandate. That's why we give you determinants, that when we can shortly say, like on a guarantee basis, say that this attitude will lead to behavior. Specificity of the attitude, being completely self-aware, being accessible and completely knowing the attitude, and having that attitude as the first blink of the thought. The blink of an eye, and that attitude is in your thought and in your vision. That's going to be leading to your behavior. Now, knowing that not every attitude leads to behavior, let's come to proper specific topics that we have now, which is the last for today's class. So speaking of attitude, holding up belief systems, there are two major set of topics that we need to discuss. First, what is a stereotype? Stereotypes are assumptions, remember? So they're just assumptions, which is a set of ideas. They are not any sort of belief system. They are just set of ideas and assumptions about group of people who share some characteristics, also share certain attributes. So let's take an example. When we call this is just an example. It's not a stereotype as such, but when we say now these stereotypes are changing in the environment. If you notice, when people end up saying that men needs to be breadwinners, today women are breadwinners in the families also. So when we speak about this, let's take an example of 1960s in Indian countries. Men are breadwinners. That is something which is coming as a stereotype, because the group, they all group of, like, the group is the men group, all of them at 1960s were breadwinners to their families. All of them, they had this common feature which was common to all, a common characteristic, which is breadwinning and facilitating their family. So that is a stereotype. It's a set of assumption. We've not analyzed it. And coming down, the generation being changed, there have been like 2 to 3 decades that has changed. From there to now, there are changes in it. So first of all, stereotypes are often negatively impactful. They are very simple because you don't analyze them. You don't learn anything from out. You don't observe them. They are generally assumptions. As stated, you just pick them up as stated. Like when you're going for a fair, let's take there's a fair which is around your area, and and it could be when we talk about stereotypes, they can be both positives and negatives, but mostly stereotypes are found to be negative. So let's take an example. I'm giving a positive one right now. So let's take an example. There's a fair around your house during Diwali, and you've heard that the fair is extremely amazing, but there's a lot of traffic jam. So to get inside the fair, it takes approximately 1.5 hours to it. Now, simple. You've not been there. You do not have an experience of it, and at the same time, it's very unfair to just judge because you've just gone through people's judgment onto it. It is not something that you have encountered. So it's simple, often negative. So the fare is good, but the traffic jam is leading to a little bit of negativity over there, and the fact that it can be dangerous for it could be unfair for people who are selling stuff during Diwali and making a living out of it. So stereotypes are often assumptions. They are not overly analyzed. They're very simple. We do not look forward or onto it anything. Now coming to something, and stereotype can be both positives and negatives. It can be both that we talk about. Now let's come down to prejudice that we have. Prejudices refers to a belief, thoughts, feelings, and attitudes someone holds about a group. So belief system is a complete cognition. It's stronger than the stereotype. Why? Because it has a belief system. Belief is the cognitive thought. The thinking reasoning has already been done here. So this is more stronger than stereotype. It's not based on personal experiences again. It is again a prejudgment originating outside the actual experience. Those are assumptions outside the experiences, and because the group has a certain common attribute in it, this is feelings, attitude, and thoughts that you've held about a group without a common experience. But they're stronger because you do a lot of thinking, reasoning about it later. While prejudice is based upon beliefs outside of experiences, experiences can lead to make you feel that the prejudice is actually confirmed and justified. Why did I say it's stronger? Because the belief is what? Belief systems are cognitive thoughts. They are the thinking, reasoning, and problem solving. They make you analyze a topic way too much to make you understand the importance of it, make you understand the availability, the need for it. So when we talk about something which is prejudices, they are coming out of experiences, yes, true, but they are the belief. They are the cognitive thought of the of anything that you hold about a group. Also, because of the fact that they get so confirmed as their belief system and people think about it, analyze them so much, they also become a confirmation bias. That's why it leads to a lot of discrimination in countries that we have. So let's take an example. I know a lot of people would not like it, but when we talk about Nazis, and when we talk about Adolf Hitler, we have this stereotype that people at that point of time who were siding Nazis and siding Hitler were equally brutal, equally dictator heads. No, they were not. They obviously were different from Hitler. They were under him. They were under his army. It was like a work profile to him. Now prejudice is when we come down to a belief. Why was he a dictator? Because he wanted to an entire country. A dictatorship is about taking over an entire country, community that he wanted. So we did have a confirmation bias that this is the reason that he was a bitter and an evil person. But we forget something because it's a confirmation bias. He was an amazing orator. He had that charm to take over people and listen to him. Ever see his audios and videography and audios where people are literally shouting after his speeches and loving his speeches? So that is also a part. But the fact that we are prejudiced about that thought, we don't go beyond that because it's a belief system that we've held about Nazis and Adolf, and that the World War II that happened and was what has led to a confirmation bias about that particular community and an individual. Remember, while prejudice often originates out of experiences, it is instinctive. It is not instinctive. It's not an instinctive thing. It usually happens because it's a belief system. We think about it, we feel about it, and remember, from these prejudices, which becomes confirmation biases, comes down discrimination. It leads to discrimination for us when we come down to this. So assumption leads to I would not say assumption will lead to a belief system, but there are times that stereotypes, often being negative, leads to prejudices, and prejudices becoming confirmation bias because they are confirming the bias because you've thought too much about it, despite it was not a personal experiences and it's negative. You end up it ends up leading to discrimination to you. So that finishes with today's class for us, and I hope it was understandable. We will continue with stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination for you. Thank you, everyone.